Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners go to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth.
Welcome into another episode of the Money Insights Podcast, where we talk about all things money and business. My name is Rod Zabriskie. If you are a regular listener, you probably noticed right off the bat things are a little different today. Usually Christian Allen is our primary host, and was planning to do that again today, but unfortunately he got sick, and we had an interview all lined up, and we'll get into that here in a minute, but we decided to go ahead and move forward with the interview, so I got to solo host today, and we wish Christian well and hope he's feeling better really quickly, and so you'll be hearing him again here on upcoming podcasts. But as you probably notice, and any regular listeners know that once Christian introduces me, I always have a little aside, unrelated piece of information that I like to jump in with. And I think for today, my thought is basically, with the new year, with kind of new beginnings, and even some kind of retrospective things of looking at last year, I just want to say thank you to our listeners, to our clients, to people who we get the pleasure of just rubbing shoulders with every day, and learning from all of you. So our hope with the podcast is that we can, share a little bit and help people learn. But by far, I would say, I learn a lot every day from just rubbing shoulders with great people. And so kind of a shout out and a thank you for that. Okay. So for our topic today, we have an interview with Julie Broad, who is the founder of a self-publishing firm called Book Launchers, and we'll get into a lot of content as far as what she does and how she does it. But real quickly, as an intro to her, like I said, so she founded Book Launchers, and she's a #1 best-selling author on Amazon overall as well, and so you'll hear her talk about that a little bit. And she has a really cool YouTube channel, booklaunchers.tv, for anybody who is interested in learning a little more about her and kind of what she does. She's also been featured on in Forbes, Entrepreneur.com, Yahoo Business, CTV, etc. So she is kind of well known in the industry and has a really cool model. That's probably the highlight of the interview, is that we get into their model and what specifically they're doing with the authors to make their books a success, not just getting words on a page, but really making it so that it spreads the message and reaches the audience and does all of the cool things that are envisioned when someone sets out on that journey. And so obviously this episode is great for people who have been thinking of maybe writing or doing something on that side. Hopefully it'll give you some really good step-by-step, ways of getting involved in doing that. But I would say it could be, interesting in the broader sense, because we get into kind of the entrepreneurial model. Writing a book and publishing a book is very much an entrepreneurial venture. And for a lot of people, it ties in with the other things that they're doing. So whether that be their business or a kind of a special mission they have in their life, philanthropic, whatever, what it boils down to is creating a product, marketing that product, getting people to buy off on it, and then kind of trying to perpetuate that process. And so really for any business owner, entrepreneur, I think that today's interview can be really helpful for you, because with specific examples, starting with Julie, but other authors that she's working with, but then even just kind of working through the process and seeing, hey, there's a step-by-step thing here that could actually apply regardless of what I'm doing. If I'm selling a widget, that process could apply as well. So hopefully it pays off and everybody is able to benefit from today's interview. And of course, as usual, if you like what we're doing here, go ahead and give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to our podcast. Always love to get those reviews and get some feedback on that. But as it is, without any further ado, here comes our interview with Julie Broad. Julie Broad, welcome onto the Money Insights podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're so grateful to have you. And I think to begin with, maybe it would be helpful as a starting point. Can you just give our listeners a quick glance into your background?
Yeah, sure. I started investing in real estate in 2001. I was just about to go back to school to do my MBA, and I picked up a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and was like, oh, I got to get my money working for me so I don't graduate with nothing but debt for the second time around. Yeah. So yeah, I took the money I had saved for grad school and I put it into 2 investment properties and financed with student loans to get through school. But that was kind of the first of real estate, and I just kept going. I had convinced my boyfriend at the time to do it, and he joined in, and we just kept buying properties. And by 2008, with the epically bad timing that I have, yeah. I quit my full-time job and went full-time into real estate, and I started a real estate training and education company. It's a long journey, but that eventually led to me writing my first book, which eventually led to me starting Book Launchers, which is the company that I run today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And I have a similar journey in that finding Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of at a similar time in my life. I did an MBA as well. And so I can relate at least that much. And then obviously we went on a little bit different paths, but just the whole idea of having your own business and kind of making things happen sounds like you have done some pretty cool things. So which we'll get to learn a little more about today with especially the Book Launchers side. But how did that come about? Like you said, long story. We don't necessarily get into everything, but what kind of give us a little bit of background on how that all evolved from the investing side and moved into the whole kind of Book Launcher side.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a couple pivotal moments. The first was with my first book, I was in conversations with Wiley and a couple other publishers. And Wiley said, I told them, oh yeah, I've got a book idea. After 12 years of investing, I was like, I've got stories. And they said, no, like we've already done general real estate books. And even though in my heart, I was like, this is not like nobody's talked about all the mistakes they've made. And that was really what my book was going to be. But they said, you know what, we're interested in you. And they gave me a book idea. And we went back and forth on a book proposal for 3 months, which is really unusual. If you're going the traditional route, you're usually writing a book proposal, getting an agent, the agent's shopping it around, and then you're getting a book deal. So to be in direct talks with the publisher was unusual. So I assumed I was getting a book deal. 3 months into this, I get an email that says the marketing department doesn't think you have a strong enough platform to sell books. So it was like, no, thank you. After all of that. And so I was devastated. I mean, because I had this like little girl inside of me that always thought she'd write a book and be a writer. Yeah. And now she was being told like, no, like your idea wasn't good enough and now you're not good enough. But I kind of picked myself up and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it better than if I had worked with Wiley. And so I dove into publishing and I studied book marketing and I studied the publishing process and I studied self-publishing and I went the self-publishing route. But I did it in every way to the level of quality or better than a traditionally published book would be. And I ended up taking it to number 1 on Amazon. So ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones, like number 1 in print books. And I was number 1 for 45 days. I was in the top 100, not number 1 for 45 awesome. Days. I was in the top 100 for 45 days. And and that really opened my eyes to the power of self-publishing because I made way more money. I got to write the book I wanted to write, not the book they wanted me to write. And I also was able to really evolve it. And my real estate investment business started to attract capital like crazy. And my investment company, the training company, our classes filled, our masterminds filled. Like it was just such a powerful thing. And then I started to meet people who were doing it and they weren't creating success. And I started to started to actually work on a lot of traditionally published books as a co-author or writing a chapter or even a content editor. Yeah. And I just started to see all the gaps and the differences between what people were doing that did things well and what people were doing that weren't succeeding. And I just kept, that was way more fun than what I was doing in real estate. And I just sort of gravitated towards it. When my husband decided to leave the real estate business, I was like, I don't want to do this just me. He's the mortgage guy. So I was like, I'm not doing real estate without you. And so then I started to dream up a business and I dreamed up the business I would want to work for and that I wanted to be a part of. And that was Book Launchers.
Yeah, that is awesome. It's a great story. Okay. Now I'm really interested though in the response that you got from Wiley, because the way you worded that is you said it wasn't about the content necessarily. Maybe there was some of that, but you said it was about the platform of your ability to market the book. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind they gave me a book idea, so this was their book idea. They turned me down because they didn't think I would be able to sell enough books. And it's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have with why they want to get a book. They want a traditional publisher.
Yeah.
They think they're going to sell the book. You're going to get a book deal because you can prove that you're going to sell books. The publisher doesn't actually sell books. The publisher gives you distribution. The publisher sometimes gives you a bit of media, but surprisingly, media actually doesn't sell books. It sells a little bit, but it really doesn't do a lot to sell books, because I was on television all across Canada when my book came out. I'm Canadian originally. I live in Las Vegas now. And television appearances don't change the book sales at all. And some of our clients, the only exception we've seen is 2020. 2020 sold books, but I mean, lots of the other ones, they don't change the book sales. But traditional publishers are only going to give you a book deal if you can sell a lot, like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 books. And so if you can do that, you really don't need them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you could have a brilliant idea and just know everything there is to know about a topic, but if you can't drive the sales, then maybe that's not going to happen. So, and we'll get into this a little more, because I know in your business that you do focus a lot on moving from writing and into the marketing, and so we'll obviously get into that here in a minute. But what are the primary benefits of becoming a self-published author?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit. Like, you keep all control, which is really big. Like, I meet a lot of authors who are shoved into a concept that actually doesn't help them in the ways that they want it to help them. They hate their title, they hate their cover, and now they have to talk about it and look at it all the time. So control is really big. But the big thing a lot of people don't realize is this is your intellectual property. And your intellectual property is an asset, like, because we're talking nonfiction, even fiction, it's intellectual property. And so to give you an example of what that means, one of my friends did get a book deal with Wiley. And then a couple years later, a production company had a pilot idea for HGTV. And they wanted him to be the star of the show. Wiley would not negotiate. And because the concept revolved around the IP that was in the book, he couldn't do it unless he bought back the rights to the book. So he had to buy back the rights to the book, which entailed buying every print copy that was in distribution off of the shelves of the bookstore. So it was very expensive. Another example, another one of my friends wrote a book about investing in the States. So again, from Canada. And then he left the real estate space and started a personal development type company and was no longer promoting the book. Wiley didn't like that. I'm unintentionally picking on Wiley here. I don't mean to, but my friends all got deals with Wiley, so that was how it goes.
Got it.
And they republished the book under somebody else's name, word for word, his book, his stories, his content. He had 2 co-authors. Those co-authors got no credit, and they were still in the real estate space. It's gross, right? Like, it's gross they can do that, but
that's not right.
It's legally right. It's morally gross.
Yeah, because they own the intellectual property.
They own the intellectual property. So a lot of people don't realize that when they sign a book deal. You're selling away that property. You no longer own it or control what can happen to it.
Yeah. No, that's
and then the final piece is
critical.
royalties. I mean, you make so much more money as a self-published author. With my that launch week, right, where I sold thousands and thousands of copies, I made in that first period, I made about $86,000 off book sales. If I had a book deal, that would have been under $10,000. Huge difference.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Good. Yeah, that's pretty compelling. So now I've heard you mention that if someone is a published author, that carries more weight than if they have a degree. So tell us a little more about that.
Look around your industry and look at the credentials of all the people. Everybody has the same credentials. Like, we both have MBAs, right? So what differentiates you in your industry? Well, if you've written the book on the subject, then now you've got something that your peers don't have. Because it's just one of those things where it's really hard to stand out with a degree. It's kind of that base level minimum of what you need in most industries. So a book is something that opens those doors. Plus, if you're going to go on a news show, they rarely put MBA or whatever your credentials are beside your name, but they will put author of. It is just an accepted form of thought leadership or expertise in an area. Okay, yeah.
So the degree almost has become expected, but maybe authorship is not, right? It's got it. Okay. Very cool. Okay, so let's say that I'm convinced that I should become an author. Mm-hmm. So what do I do next? Or in other words, what's the step-by-step process from the point of starting to write to kind of having a finished product and having it published?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing it at the level of quality that we do it, that I kind of did my book, our process is 248 steps. So it's huge. Okay. It takes a lot. But generally speaking, to begin, and one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they're like, I'm going to write a book, and they start writing. You've missed a lot of pieces. And that's why I started book launchers, is because a lot of people aren't thinking about marketing until their book is done. You need to think about your marketing and your goals before you start writing. And so what I mean by that is you really need to be clear on who your audience is and why they need this book. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of people just kind of get inspired because they've been told their story is important and they should write it. And it is important, but it's not for you. It's for your reader, and you have to write everything through that lens of knowing exactly who that reader is. So that's step one, is really getting clear on that and not being afraid about going niche. A lot of people are like, my story's for everyone. Well, unless you have the budget of Coca-Cola, you aren't going to be able to market to everyone. So you really, a niche market is so much easier. We had a book on tactical lock picking, and it's for first responders. Like that is almost as narrow as you get, right? Like it's pretty much fire people because they're the first on site. And yet that book, like our team pitches you for podcasts and media and like all the things at the end of the process. And they were getting like a 65 to 75% yes rate on their pitches, which is huge. Yeah, usually we're like 25 to 30%.
Yeah, if you're doing it really well.
Yeah. And so, and that's because it was a very specific book that offered a very specific benefit to a specific audience. It was an easy yes, right? So you want to create a book that is an easy yes. And you want it to fit with your goals. So this is one of the things I mentioned with traditional publishers is you can get shoved into a concept that doesn't actually work for you. Well, if you're hoping this book is going to grow your brand or grow your business or raise capital, or you want to be a paid speaker, you want to make sure that you're writing a book that is going to connect to the audience that you ultimately want to serve in whatever that end goal is. And so that's why you got to do a lot of thinking before you start writing, because missing that is something you can't fix after the book's done.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just in that answer, you actually redefined for me your brand, because I looked at book launchers and I thought, hey, it's a book and we need to get it launched or published, in other words. But it comes a lot earlier than that. The launch is at conception and developing it into not just the content itself, but how you're going to present that. And so, yeah, I like that. Okay, so you have the concept. You are at the point where you're starting to write. Yep. What are the steps that move us into the process from there?
It depends. So if you are somebody who likes to write, you might want to write it yourself. You'll need an outline. You'll need a writing plan. We have writing coaches that will coach you through it and help you create that writing plan and kind of guide you along the way. Largely, our coaches end up being emotional support as well as, they read the writing and they give you writing support, but they're really accountability and emotional support is 2/3 of their job. And they also keep you on track, because what happens, especially if you have any sort of an entrepreneurial personality type, which a lot of people who write books tend to have, they start writing one book and halfway through they're writing a totally different book. Happens all the time. So the writing coach will keep you on track. But we also have writers, because a lot of people don't want to sit at the keyboard and type away. A lot of people are more comfortable talking. And so when you have a writer, they can either take content that you have and interview you to fill in the rest. Some people will just do voice notes and talk it out on their own and send it to the writer. There's lots of ways to get a book done. It doesn't have to be you that types it. So the next steps really are, once you've got a writing plan, it's how are you going to get that content out of your head and onto the page? And there's lots of ways to tackle it. Even people who write it themselves, some of them start with voice notes, get them transcribed, and then massage it themselves too. So I go from video scripts. I shoot lots of YouTube videos, and I take those video scripts and put them in the manuscript, and then I go back through and add content and add stories and massage it from there. I don't like looking at a blank page. I find it daunting. So just taking something and starting with content from somewhere else helps me. I wish I could say this is the one way to do it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great though. Yeah. Okay. So I do have a question though, because you mentioned getting other people involved with the writing and whatnot. Does that usually turn into a co-authorship, or is it kind of, I've heard of the term ghostwriting and that kind of thing. Maybe it's some combination. Maybe that's not an easy answer either, but how does that, especially as it relates to people who are working with kind of your business model and you're bringing to the table writers and coaches that can help kind of work through that process. How does that usually go?
Yeah. How we're set up is different than a lot of the options on the market.
Okay.
Ours is set up as a writing assist. And so, you can call it a ghostwriter. It has elements of ghostwriting. A typical ghostwriter is somebody who, like a celebrity, would hire, and they write the book, and they often are generating a lot of the research and the content, and they'll shadow you and ask you questions. Ours is really, this is somebody is a professional writer who's going to assist you. And so that you're really involved. Like it's not painless. You're still going to experience the pain of writing a book. Somebody else is just sitting there typing and choosing the keywords. You can have co-authors. Some ghostwriters will want credit. Some will even want royalties. But how we're set up is, this is your book. We're just service. And so you're fully independent at the end of this. And our writers or coaches or whoever's there, they're just helping you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have content, we have a book, and I'm sure it goes through different phases of editing and then obviously kind of layout and whatnot. So to kind of walk us through steps for getting to the point where now it's ready to be published.
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing I want to point out, a lot of people hire editors, but they don't hire them in the right order, or they don't even know there's different editors. Once you get that first draft down, your first editor needs to be a developmental editor or a content editor. They're the same thing.
Okay.
Two different words to describe the same thing. This is the editor that's going to look at it from a higher level view, make sure it's structurally sound, make sure you've got credibility, make sure it's something people want to read. Once you've got that, that's what actually makes your book better. Because I get a lot of people who come to me and they're like, I paid this editor thousands of dollars and my book isn't better. They'll make it grammatically correct, but it's not better. So you need that developmental or content editor. And then you go to a copy editor. A copy editor is the person following the Chicago Manual of Style or the rule book, right? They're going to change your grammar, your sentence structure, your word choice, your punctuation. So they're going to polish your book. And then we put it through a proofread with a different person afterwards. I found that copy editors are close to proofreaders, but you still need that eagle eye, right? That person who can just spot that you've spelt that word wrong and been inconsistent with how you kind of abbreviate things or something like that.
Yeah.
So those are the three. And while we're doing all of that, we're starting to work on your marketing. So you start meeting with, we have kind of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of our marketing. And so you start phase 1 of your marketing, which is kind of laying that strategic roadmap of what's your launch going to look like and what are your resources for launch. Then we also do research. We're going to research your keywords for Google, your keywords for Amazon, your categories, your pricing, your competition. So we've got all that when we write your book description and your bio, and we've got that when we create your cover. So there's lots, and we also do influencer research too, because we want to be able to connect with people who are going to care about your message, and they might be endorsements, they might promote your book for you. So there's a whole bunch of things we're doing while you're in edit to set you up for success. Website, social media audits, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then we go into cover design, and our cover design, a lot of people don't realize how finicky cover design is. It is really looking at who you're competing with, what's the trusted elements that most of the books in that category have, and then how are you going to stand out. And so we take elements of your brand, we take the idea of your hook and your title, and we kind of art and science marry it all together to try to come up with a cover that's going to stand out when it's essentially thumbnail size. Like that's where the majority of our focus is now, is book covers in thumbnail size. So
yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like it's almost some kind of strange combination between the book needs to fit in, but it also needs to stand out.
I mean, it's kind of society, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
We need to fit in so we're trusted, but we need to stand out so people listen to us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
So, and then we're almost there. Once you've got the cover, you do the interior, and we take elements from the cover to design the interior so that it creates an experience, right? So like the font from the cover might become the drop cap, that first big letter that starts a chapter. Or sometimes there's a style element on the cover that will play through in the entire book. But we really want to have it be that whole experience when you read a book, whether it's in print or ebook. And so we take that and design the interior. Everything is designed for print and ebook. With nonfiction, just one quick thing. A lot of people think everybody's into Kindle, but like 65 to 75% of our authors are selling print books. Their book sales are in print books. A few, if they have an audio book, the print might drop down a bit to make room for audio, where they might be selling 15 to 20% in audio. But print books are still what people want when it comes to nonfiction.
Yeah, that is interesting. That does kind of fly in the face of what I would have expected. So very interesting. Okay, so this is where it gets fun. So first of all, will you share an experience where you worked with an author and it was just like an amazing, whether it be the book itself or the person and the process, but tell us about just kind of an experience you had where it just stands out because it was just such an amazing experience.
Yeah, I mean, most of our authors are incredible people, because I think to write a book, you have to be somebody who wants to have an impact, which is a special kind of human in many ways. You're sharing, you're being vulnerable and sharing stuff that isn't easy to share, usually, in order to have an impact on others. So most of our authors are really incredible people. But one of my favorite stories is an author, his name is Robert Bell, and he's an accountant, and he wrote a book on creativity because he's like, these are two things that people don't think go together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's a really, it's called Blow the Lid Off. And it's interesting because a lot of our authors don't have a platform, like something I could relate to when Wiley shut me down. So they don't have a platform in the space that they're talking to, or they have a bit of a network, but it's not, it's not Amazon #1 best-selling kind of network, or New York Times, or any of those kind of things. And so Robert's one of those examples where he had a really cool concept, a really cool book, and he did all the steps, kind of went through our process. And at the end of it, decent launch, but, no fireworks. But what he did that a lot of people don't do is he kept going, right? We kept marketing, we kept helping him find new places and, pitching him and finding new angles. And about 7 months post-launch, or 8 months post-launch, he'd done a lot of podcast interviews. He'd done a lot of kind of mini speaking gigs and things like that. And this TED Global Ideas opportunity came up, and he pitched them an idea, because from all of the things he'd done, he knew what was resonating from his message. And so he pitched that idea, and he ended up getting a TED Global Ideas talk. And last time I looked, he had almost 2 million views on this TED Global Ideas. Awesome. It was on the homepage of TED, not TEDx, like TED.com. And it's just such a cool story, because he's impacting so many people. There's so many opportunities coming his way. He's now nominated for like the top 40 under 40, I think, for all of Africa. He's in Africa, by the way. He has a lot of his markets in North America, but he's in Africa. So he's now nominated for a top 40 under 40 in Africa. It's just such a phenomenal story of somebody who just didn't give up. He just kept going, and he was like, I'm going to find the market. Something cool is going to happen. And it did.
Well, that is kind of a microcosm of the entrepreneur's journey, right? Because we don't get it right immediately. We have to try different iterations and find what's sticking and really what resonates, and really what's helping people in a real way to then kind of build after that. So that's awesome. Okay, so now on the other side of it, tell me about an experience that was unique. I'll let you define what that means, but we don't have to, names or whatever, but just, something that was afterwards you just were shaking your head like, I don't even know what just happened.
Well, I can tell you about one of the few books that we couldn't turn into a book, because that's something that a lot of people worry about is, I don't have a story here. And so this, and obviously I'll blur the details a little bit on this one, but yeah, so one of the only people that I've said, like, there's no book here. There's been 2 where I've said that. There's been 4 where I've said we can't work with you. But there's been 2 where there was just no book. One of them was almost entirely plagiarized. Like, that was a major problem. Yeah. But this one was, so he tried hard to get a book out, and we got as far as editing. But ultimately the story was flat. And here's whether it was true or not. What he was presenting was, he married his high school sweetheart. He went to work for the family business. The family business did incredibly well. He made a ton of money. He started investing in real estate, and he made a ton of money in real estate because the market went up. And there he is, like, life is perfect.
Okay.
And so that's a book where you just want to punch the person in the face. Like, who can relate to that? I mean, I owned a crack house and a property manager got charged with manslaughter and tenants pulled knives on each other. I mean, like, nothing went wrong. Come on. So that's why I say, like, whether it was true or not. So I don't know whether this is actually his life.
Yeah.
And if it is, like,
Yeah.
he has a glorious life. Like, he's one in a million. But if it's not true, he just wasn't willing to go where he needed to go to actually connect with people. But people are not going to connect with a story where everything goes right, because there's almost nobody I've ever met that can relate to that story.
Yeah, and especially in nonfiction, but I would say even in fiction, why do we read? It's so that we can learn and grow and maybe kind of live the experience with the person so that we can then be better afterwards.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. Perfect. Okay. So what would you say are the maybe 2 or 3 keys that differentiate book launchers from your competitors?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that we are marketing focused from day one. And to the point now where our process is actually evolving so that your first conversation when you start with us isn't even with a writer or a writing coach. It's with the marketing team to define your brand, to define your hook, to define where you want to take this book at the end. And then we're layering that in through the whole process, which we've always layered marketing in through the whole process. But this year we've actually evolved it. So conversation 1 is with marketing because it's so vital. And it's something that, you know, the marketing team has input through this process, which I don't know any other company where the marketing team actually works with the writing team, with the editing team, and says like, hey, that concept has a problem, or hey, this is really cool. If you add this little piece, we can now pitch it to this market. And so they're very, very involved. We're a team that, like, everything is shared because we want to create these books that help, you know, we're pitching you at the end and we're set up as a membership. And so as long as you're a member, we keep working on your book. And so if we're doing well and your book is doing well, you're probably going to stay with us for a long time. And a lot of our authors are writing book 2. We have a few that are on book 3. So you can stay with us forever. We can have this really wonderful long-term relationship. So we want you to succeed. And so everything we do is to set you up for marketing success.
Yeah. So it's not an event. Just getting the book launched is not the end. It's a process. Yeah. And I think that's one of the challenges with the book launch and the whole book industry is there's so much emphasis put on that launch that you almost feel like a failure if you don't have that. Like, you know, I have this #1 bestseller story, but my next 2 books didn't go there. And my latest book, Self-Publish and Succeed, I would argue is almost as successful as my first book without that #1, because I've got all these partnerships that are working to grow book launchers and are connecting me into the publishing industry. And so, but it's that misnomer, I think, or that idea that you have to launch, and if your launch doesn't do phenomenal, then your book is a failure. And that's not true. I mean, look at Robert Bell's story. He's, 7 months later, 8 months later, and he's got a TED Global Ideas talk. I mean, most people would love to have that happen. Absolutely.
It's a huge success. So I think people have to keep going and go into it with a mindset of, if you want to use this book as a tool to grow your brand and your business and make money from, you don't launch and then stop. You launch and keep going.
It becomes a tool, because having the book is obviously a huge step in the way, but if you aren't getting it in the hands of readers, then it's not doing any good, right? It's like the old thing about, if there's a sound in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, then anyway.
Does it make a sound?
Same thing. If you have words in a book but nobody reads them, then similar concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, let's say someone has already published a book in some form, in whatever process they went through, and maybe it wasn't as successful as they had hoped. What can they do now to better their marketing and whatnot?
Yeah, I think first you want to have some data. So you can figure out what the potential issues are. So if you're not running Amazon ads, I would highly recommend starting to run Amazon ads, because that will at least give you some data to figure out, like, is it the title? Is it the cover? Is it the description or the keywords? Because chances are a cover refresh and a book description refresh might help, but you won't know what the problem is. And so that's where I start. I would start with some data to figure out, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to test first? If it's a title problem, it's a bigger thing to change than if it's a cover refresh and keywords and your metadata, your description, things like that. But otherwise you're just guessing, right? You'd ask, oh, what do you think's
Okay.
wrong with my book, right? Well,
Yeah.
nobody really knows for sure. So I would get some data. Once you've got that, you can look at it. And if you're running ads and you're getting impressions, but nobody's clicking, it's a cover or title issue. So first thing to
Okay.
do is to change your cover. If you're getting clicks, but people aren't, well, let me back up. It could also be a keyword issue. So you'd need to look into your keywords to see if you're not resonating with the audience that you think you should be resonating with.
Okay.
So that can also be an issue. I kind of jumped to the assumption that the keywords were good because we've done the research.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
keywords would be the first place, and then cover. If you're getting clicks but people aren't buying, you want to look at your reviews, because if you don't have at least 25 reviews on your book, that we've seen that to impact ads. Kind of 25 and 100. If you've got more than 100, that really positively impacts your reviews. And as long as you've got at least 25, your ads will, that'll impact your ads. But your 25 is kind of that first sweet spot.
Okay.
So before you kind of change anything dramatically, I would try and get at least 25 reviews. And then you want to look at what's going on your sales page and look at your book description. And really read it, see if you've got your keywords in there, change that book description, make that first sentence really compelling, practically scream to that reader. If you have this problem, this book is going to help you solve it, and change that up first. And then if all of that doesn't work, then you got to look at your book and probably do a relaunch. You probably have to slightly alter the hook of the book and really make it more clear and more specific for an audience. But it's a journey also to fix a book that is not selling.
Yeah. And is that something you do? Have you been kind of plugged in with people who already have published, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're okay with a relaunch, we don't go.
Okay.
We tried many times to help people market books, but what we have found is if you haven't done all of these things that we have done, most people aren't patient enough for us to go backwards and do it while they're waiting for their book to start selling. But if you're doing a relaunch, we can dive in and we can fix a lot of these things and even beef up or improve the content of the book, which is essentially like going through our process again. So relaunches we do, but marketing only, we don't do it because we've tried and we just can't create the kind of success that we'd like to see.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, kind of to wrap things up here, what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, if you want help with writing a book and you kind of want a guide to walk you through the steps I was saying, like think about this stuff before you hire anybody, I've got a download that they can get. So go to booklaunchers.com/7 steps, and that will get you that download. And then it also gets you my email, because when you get that download, you get my email address, so you can just hit reply.
Perfect. Okay, great way to plug in and kind of see what it looks like. Okay, well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great. Really appreciate awesome content, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights Podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, visit moneyinsights.net.